All right, back again for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking into something that's making a lot of noise, a lot of buzz out there. The Trump administration shutting down Task Force Klepto Capture.
Klepto Capture.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We're using this YouTube video from Occupy Democrats as our jumping off point.
Okay.
And, full disclosure, they lean left, but our
Yeah.
deep dives are all about the facts.
Absolutely.
So think of it as, we're going to get to the core of it.
Right.
Without the political spin, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're all about.
That's what we do here.
Exactly. Get to the bottom of it.
So what exactly was this task force? What was it all about?
Well, it was a task force created by the Biden administration
Yeah.
in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially the goal was to target the wealth of these Russian oligarchs.
Okay.
These are those super rich individuals with close ties to Putin.
Okay, so hitting Putin's inner circle where it hurt. Right in the pocketbook.
Right. And so did they manage to accomplish anything? Like, did they make any headway?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
They got some high-profile indictments.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Guys like Oleg Deripaska, who's a big name in the aluminum industry.
Okay.
Konstantin Malofeev, who's kind of a media mogul. They were both charged with evading sanctions.
Oh, I see.
Plus, they seized some luxury assets like yachts
Right.
belonging to other oligarchs like Suleiman Karimov and Viktor Vekselberg.
Wow.
These weren't just like for show,
Right.
They were putting real pressure on these individuals.
That's fascinating. Sounds like they were really making some progress,
yeah.
putting on the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But then everything changed, right?
Right. When Attorney General Pam Bondi took office,
Okay.
on her first day, she issued a memo disbanding Klepto Capture.
Wow. Her first day.
Their first day.
That's sending a strong message right there. What was the reasoning?
Yeah. Well, the memo states that resources are going to be redirected to combating drug cartels and international gangs, really emphasizing a change in approach to focus more on sort of threats within the United States.
Okay, so it's a trade-off, less focus on the Russian oligarchs.
Right.
And more on, I guess, what some might consider more direct threats.
Yeah.
I can see how that would raise some eyebrows.
Sure.
Especially, the folks over at Occupy Democrats, our source video, seem pretty concerned. Like, their word, this could, jeopardize world peace.
I mean, it's understandable that people would look for the connections here.
Right.
Especially given Trump's history of positive statements about Putin, reluctance to criticize Russia, even in the face of, evidence of election meddling.
That's right. That history's there. It definitely adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, what are the implications?
Right.
Could disbanding this task force embolden Putin?
Potentially.
Or, undermine the efforts to hold Russia accountable?
I mean, those are definitely valid concerns. Some argue that dismantling Klepto Capture sends a signal of appeasement to Russia.
Interesting.
Which could potentially embolden Putin and even weaken the international efforts to hold Russia accountable.
Makes you think, does this move inadvertently strengthen Russia's position on the world stage?
It's a question worth considering, yeah.
For sure. And what about the impact on the conflict in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
It's still raging.
Yeah. At the same time, though, we do have to acknowledge the argument that, focusing on cartels and gangs is legitimate, right?
Right.
Those are serious issues.
They are.
Direct consequences.
Yeah, it's not black and white, right?
Right.
There's these multiple perspectives we have to keep in mind. But, tackling the cartels, the gangs, that's crucial. But could it come at the cost of, global stability?
Well, that's the big question. And to understand the potential consequences, I think we have to look a little deeper into what this shift actually looks like.
So let's get into it. What are some concrete examples of how this change is playing out? Like, what does it mean on the ground?
So one example is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or FCPA. Traditionally, this was focused on bribery investigations involving large multinational corporations.
I see.
Now, with this new directive, the FCPA unit is going to prioritize cartel-related bribery.
So, a pretty significant shift in focus.
Yeah.
Can you give us an idea of the scale here? Like, what kind of companies were we talking about before?
I mean, we're talking about major corporations, Goldman Sachs, Glencore, even Walmart.
Wow.
So shifting to cartels could mean less scrutiny
Right.
on these companies.
So it's not just a change in priorities.
Right.
It's a potential shift in who's being held accountable.
Yeah.
Makes you think, could this have ripple effects throughout the global economy?
It raises questions about who might benefit from this change.
Yeah, this is getting really interesting, and I bet our listeners are already forming some opinions. What do you think? Is this a savvy, strategic move?
Right.
A worrisome shift?
Yeah.
Or something else entirely?
Weigh in. We want to hear what you think.
Exactly. We've given you the information. Now let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
And we'll be back to discuss more.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting to think about this in the wider context of U.S.-Russia relations.
Right.
The timing, the war in Ukraine still going on, adds another layer here.
For sure. Hard not to think about the impact on the conflict, global stability, the whole thing. I mean, the video even goes as far as comparing Trump's actions to Putin's, which is...
It's a bold statement.
It is. It's provocative, but it reflects this worry that this move could signal a shift in the U.S. stance on Russia.
Right.
And it's not like this is the first time questions have been raised about Trump and Putin.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election.
Exactly.
That whole thing was a big deal.
Yeah.
All those questions about possible collusion, Trump's campaign associates meeting with Russian officials, it definitely raised concerns about his approach to Russia.
Yeah.
And now we have this, disbanding Klepto Capture. Just adds fuel to the fire. Right?
It does. Some might see it as another instance of Trump giving Russia a pass.
Right.
Maybe undermining the efforts to hold them accountable.
So is there a pattern emerging here? I mean, are we seeing mixed signals about the U.S.'s commitment to global security, to standing up to Russia?
It's a valid question, and it gets to the heart of how we interpret these actions, these policies.
Right.
We can't ignore the context, the history, the potential ripple effects.
Right.
Disband and klepto capture, whatever the intended purpose, could be seen as the U.S. stepping back from its role on the world stage.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like we're sending a message, maybe intentionally, maybe not, but it matters how it's received.
It does.
Especially by someone like Putin.
Exactly.
So how might all this actually impact the situation in Ukraine specifically?
Well, the sanctions against Russian oligarchs, which klepto capture play a key role in enforcing, were meant to apply economic pressure.
Okay.
Weaken Russia's ability to wage war.
Right.
They were also intended to show solidarity with Ukraine.
Okay.
Send a clear message that their actions have consequences.
So if those sanctions lose their bite, does that mean Russia faces fewer repercussions?
Possibly.
What about the Ukrainian people?
Yeah.
I mean, they're the ones bearing the brunt of this conflict.
They are.
Could this prolong the war?
It's a concern.
They're suffering.
Yeah, some experts believe that easing the pressure on Russia could embolden them, prolong the conflict. It could also signal a shift in the global balance of power, which could embolden other authoritarian leaders.
It's a complex geopolitical puzzle, right?
It is.
And it's not just about Ukraine.
No.
It's about the bigger picture. Global security, future of democracy. What does this say about the U.S. commitment to those values?
I think those are the big questions. Is the U.S. shifting its focus inward? And if so, what are the implications for the international order? Fight against these global threats, Authoritarianism, aggression.
That's a lot to unpack. It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by these big, complex issues, but I think it's important we try to make sense of them. What stands out to you in all this?
What's fascinating to me is how this one decision, disbanding klepto capture, can have such far-reaching consequences. It makes us think about the interconnectedness of domestic and foreign policy, how actions taken on one front can have unintended consequences on others. It also highlights the importance of perception signaling in international relations. Even if the intention is to, refocus resources, the message it sends can have a big impact on global events.
It's like that domino effect. One piece falls, triggers a chain reaction. And it's not just governments and policies. It's real people's lives.
Real people.
Affected by these decisions.
We can't lose sight of that human impact. On one side, you have the Russian oligarchs. Directly targeted. These individuals have immense wealth and influence, often tied to their relationship with the Kremlin.
And some would say they bear some responsibility for enabling Putin's actions, including the war in Ukraine.
For sure. And by targeting their assets, klepto capture aimed to hold them accountable.
Okay.
make them feel the consequences of their support.
Right.
On the other side, you have the people of Ukraine
Right.
suffering the devastating effects.
Yeah.
Displacement, destruction, loss of life.
It's a heartbreaking situation. Makes the potential consequences of disbanding Klepto Capture all the more concerning.
Absolutely.
I mean, if this move prolongs the conflict, even indirectly, it adds to their suffering.
It underscores the moral dimension here, the real-world impact on people's lives.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah.
It feels like we're at a crossroads
Yeah.
with potential ramifications for international relations, global security, democracy itself.
It's a pivotal moment. It's a reminder that these issues aren't just abstract.
Right.
They have very real consequences.
Yeah. It's a lot to process.
It is.
Yeah.
And it underscores the importance of staying informed, engaging in these difficult conversations,
Yeah.
holding our leaders accountable.
Exactly. Because ultimately, it's our actions, our collective voice, that can shape the future.
Yeah.
So we want to hear from you, the listeners. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, what concerns you? What gives you hope?
What concerns you? What gives you hope?
We believe that understanding these complexities is the first step towards creating a better future. We encourage you to continue exploring, sharing your insights.
This has been a really thought-provoking discussion.
It has.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. With this shift away from going after the Russian oligarchs and more towards these drug cartels and international gangs,
Yeah.
what might we see next?
Hard to say with any certainty, but, it definitely raises a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
For one thing, other countries might see this as the U.S. kind of stepping back
Oh, in
from
fact.
that global leadership role.
Okay.
It could affect alliances, trade agreements, even that whole balance of power.
So it's not just about Russia then?
Not necessarily. This could ripple out to the U.S.'s relationship with a lot of other countries.
I see.
Absolutely. If it looks like the U.S. is, kind of backing away from those international commitments, other nations, they might get bolder, start acting more, assertive.
Right.
Could lead to more instability.
Yeah.
And there's also the impact on, those global efforts to tackle the big stuff.
Right.
Like climate change, pandemics. If the U.S. is seen as, putting its own interests first over, international cooperation, it could get harder to make progress on those really critical things.
So you're saying if other countries start copying that, right,
Yeah.
focusing inward, less global cooperation,
Exactly.
would that lead to a world that's more, fragmented?
Potentially. It's a possibility we have to consider, especially as things are getting more complex globally.
Yeah. So we started with this one task force,
Right.
but this could be a sign of something much bigger happening.
It really could. Shows how connected everything is.
Right.
And how choices in one place, they have these ripple effects,
Yeah.
all over the globe. And it shows how important it is to look at the whole picture, that context, when we're trying to make sense of these decisions.
It's definitely been a lot to think about.
It has.
Any last thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the main thing is the world's changing all the time. We've got to be able to adapt, stay informed, stay engaged if we want to navigate this, effectively. And I guess most importantly, remember, we're in this together. Our choices, what we do individual together, that's what shapes the future.
Really well said. So, to our listeners, keep asking those questions, stay curious, and never underestimate your own power to make a difference.
Couldn't agree more.
Until next time, happy deep diving.